Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy time zone, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Identity Crisis. And I think this is going to be the last one, since we got the point that we're writing code and we got you all the way from what is identity to actually implementing identity. For this one, I'll still be driving solo and just for the first hour, because at 9 a.m. Pacific time or 12 p.m. Eastern time, JP will be joining us and we'll have a fantastic guest, Labrina Loving. I mean, that's an awesome name. And she's coming to talk to us about B2C, B2B, multi-tenancy, and how it all comes together. But for the first hour, we will be focusing on the identity platform libraries and what it is and what it isn't and what can you build with it and why it is so much fun to work with it. So thanks for joining me this morning. And I hope that today we're going to learn some interesting things. Let me know where you are from, what you're working right now. Use the chat if you have any questions. And I'm excited to be here. Hopefully you are too. Okay, so we've covered quite a few things up until this point. We probably had 8 or 9 episodes covering flows, covering protocols, covering standards. And today I'm just going to go through the libraries and then build a few things, run them, see how they work, how they're put together, some specific patterns that we use for Emsl. And hopefully that will answer some questions. And then if you have any questions during the stream, obviously, feel free to let us know or let me know. Let's start with the basis of the libraries. Now, I have my official documentation open on the page, and this is where usually you can come in and find how to build stuff with our libraries. If this is the first time that you come across the library, then you don't have any prior knowledge to that, and this is great because it is a little bit confusing considering that we have 2 libraries right now out there in the wild. We have ADAL, the old library, the Azure AD Authentication library, which is going to be discontinued as of June 30th, 2022. So you have technically a year and 3 months to migrate from ADAL. ADAL was the old library. It was targeting the V1 endpoint. And it was not as efficient as it should be. So we came up with a new version called Emsl. And hey, Prawns, nice to see you from the south coast of the UK. I hope the weather is nicer there today than it is here in Seattle. So yeah, ADAL has been around for a while, and we do know that a lot of systems use it still out there. And ideally, you should be looking at migrating. If you need some support in migration, if you need some advice, reach out to us via Discord or reach out through our official channel. You have our emails and our Twitter handles. So you can always reach out and ask questions, or if you get stuck, we have people that can help you migrate from ADAL. But the whole point there is that ADAL will not be supported anymore. Your applications will still run, by the way. It doesn't mean that your applications won't run, but they will not get the support they need or the upgrades that they need. And hey, Rocklane, East Coast, USA. Nice. Thank you for joining us. So let's assume that you're very new to identity. What's Discord? Oh yeah, Discord is, it's like Slack. I had a nice statement like Discord is Slack for Gen Xers, or Gen X is Discord for, Discord is Slack for Gen Xers. I can't remember. One of these things. Anyway, it's a new platform to communicate, and we have a very vibrant community on Discord. The link is at the very top of the stream, so you can see ak.ms45, so Discord join. This is where people can come and ask questions. Sometimes we discuss about solutions, sometimes we discuss about technology in general. It's been for gamers, but I don't know if you've seen the news. But Microsoft may be acquiring Discord. I'm not breaking the news as the first thing. It's been on Twitter since yesterday. So yeah, the link is just at the very top, just at the top of the stream. You should see the number of links. If it's not as visible, maybe we should rethink about how our positioning is placed over there. But yeah, Discord could be acquired by Microsoft. I'm not saying we will. I'm just saying that there's been a lot of chatter out there. And it's a fantastic way to build communities, right? You join Discord, you can join different rooms, different channels, and then you can communicate and ask questions or be part of the community. It's been predominantly for gamers, and it is very big on Twitch, because anyone that is streaming on Twitch apparently has a Discord. That's why we have one as well. But yeah, we've been helping quite a few people over there, and the community is growing. So make sure you join us. So yeah, where were we? We were the libraries. We're talking about Emsl. So you're new to identity, Emsl is the best place to start. Yeah, we'll open source Discord. That's a good idea. With GitHub. So if you need to build stuff with identity, the Microsoft identity, we recommend that you start with Emsl, especially if you're very new, because all our samples and everything else work with Emsl. However, it doesn't mean that you have to use Emsl if you don't want to. If you already have an OAuth 2 compatible library, an OpenID Connect compliant library, then you can use that library as well. So if your solution already uses a mature library out there that is compliant with OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect, all you have to do is just point to, well, maybe that's not a right statement. What you would have to do is usually point to the Azure AD endpoints and then change some configuration. Some packages may require additional plugins. For example, Passport for Node.js has an Azure AD component. It's a separate package that you need to bring in. So Passport, the authentication library for Node, works with Azure AD. But it's a simple plugin you download and run. But let's go back to Emsl. What is Emsl? Emsl is a library that covers most of the major languages, and we're coming with more and more and more as we go through. All these libraries have a public repo as well, which means they can go to our GitHub and find where the library is going. Sometimes we have roadmap information there. We also have GitHub issues, so if you come across a problem, you can search in the issues and see what's happening. And you'll see here, we actually redid the whole page as of maybe a month ago, just to make it a little bit more applicable. So now we categorize the libraries based on the app that you're trying to build, which makes a lot more sense since they tend to be grouped together in a logical way like this. So if you are building anything with JavaScript, which means that you're probably going to be writing some single page application, whether it's a vanilla JavaScript or something like Angular or React, then we have the libraries for you. You'll also notice that our libraries have a V1 and a V2, or no version and a V2 version. Ideally, you want to be on the latest version because the latest version will support authorization code with PKCE. PKCE. Proof key for code exchange. For PKCE, it's not a PIXIE, which I thought when I started in the division, everybody was like, PKCE is supported. And I was like, okay, what is PKCE? So when I started looking for it, it is not PIXIE, it's PKCE. But the whole point of PKCE and authorization code is that your token exchange and the code exchange will be a lot more secure rather than using the implicit flow in the older libraries. So the Angular here, this specific one is the old one, whereas the Emsl Angular v2 is the new one. Then we have JavaScript, which is something you can use. Can I paste this URL? Of course I can paste this URL. Let me do that. Thank you, Claudio, right? Apologies if I am screwing up the names, but I put it on the chat. There you go. So you should be able to grab it. And then JavaScript, if you're building vanilla JavaScript code and you don't want to use a framework, and then we also have React. However, with JavaScript, which is called Angular Emsl, Emsl browser, you can actually build other apps as well, like Vue or Aurelia. We've done some samples before where we tag directly into the JavaScript Emsl library, and then we use it inside our Vue. It just means that we don't have a Vue component, but it doesn't mean that you can't use it with Vue or other frameworks. So JavaScript Emsl browser is the one to use for anything you need. Now you'll notice that the project has a different name and the package name has a different name. Can we get a single token for the scopes which we use in the Azure AD app? You can get a single token for the same resource. So if you are calling into graph, for example, you can get a single token for all your graph scopes. However, if you have multiple APIs or multiple resources, you have to get different tokens for different resources. We did cover this one yesterday on our Emsl certification workshop that we're doing. If you want to go and catch up with that, we covered that yesterday. It will be, or it is on YouTube right now. So if we jump on YouTube, let me just find the link for you, friends, and we'll do it in a second. So we covered all that yesterday about which clients to use, when to use them, why to use them, and so on. So if I go into my videos, just gonna open or share the playlist with you. This one. So the playlist, and that was module 3, is here. Go crazy. It's about 2 hours. The workshop is also public, so you can go and follow along on the workshop. And it's a great workshop to help you understand how you can acquire resources and what have you. Sorry, tokens for resources. So yeah, we talked about auth code with Pixie. Yeah, it is recommended. That's the whole point there. And implicit grant flow. We want to avoid this as much as we can, considering that it is the least secure one when it comes to working with the Microsoft Identity Platform. In fact, not just the Microsoft Identity Platform, anything that uses that is less secure. So if you are on a different kind of platform, then again, you want to avoid it and try to move to the latest one. Let me find, where is my window with the stream? Somewhere around here. Okay, we got it. Cool. Let's go to the next one. Dun, dun, dun. Web applications. So one thing to notice here, that this library will be running on the customer or the client browser, which means that it is a public, not a confidential client. We cannot trust the fact that it's running on the client browser, and therefore that code is accessible to everyone. So it is treated as a public client, and we can't put any secrets. Whereas with web applications, because they're running on the server and they're inaccessible by the end user, we can use confidential clients. Now there are a few flavors here, so it will get a little bit confusing as we cover the libraries, but bear with me as we cover especially the .NET one. So for .NET, we have different flavors. We have the full .NET framework, then we have .NET 3, .NET Core 3.1, 3 and 3.1, and then we have .NET 5 now, and there's a little bit of convergence. So if you are using the traditional or the full FAT framework prior to .NET 5, you will have to use Emsl.NET for acquiring tokens. You need to use the ASP.NET security here to acquire your ID tokens, then Emsl to go and get your access tokens. It is a little bit confusing, I know, bear with me. So in the old ASP.NET, is it old? How old do I sound? In the traditional ASP.NET, you would go through the wizard and say, file new project, and I want authentication, and it would add the appropriate libraries for you. Unfortunately, it did not Emsl. So that meant that you could authenticate the user, but when it came to acquiring tokens, you actually had to go and download and implement Emsl for yourself, which is the case here. And that's how you would do it. And we thought that this experience sucked a lot because it left quite a bit to be desired. People needed to understand that acquiring ID tokens was different to acquiring access tokens, and that was a bit of a mess. So with ASP.NET Core 3.1 and later, we added a new library called the Microsoft Identity Web Library. This follows later on you'll see there's also a Microsoft Identity Client library. And the whole point there is that we wrap everything in one library, so you don't have to worry about ID tokens, access tokens, how and where to get them. We will show some coding in a little bit on how to implement the Microsoft Identity Web, which is the new world. So ASP.NET 3.1 and later will all support Microsoft Identity Web. Now this library here is only for web. You can't use it for desktop apps. but you can use it for Azure Functions, Azure Web Apps, gRPC, ASP.NET, MVC, ASP.NET Azure Pages, Blazor Server, no Blazor Client. For Blazor Client, we actually wrap around the Emsl JavaScript library, the Emsl browser one. But it is abstracted for you, so you don't see that when you play with Blazor Client. Then we have Java, which is now using Emsl4j. That's the official library. However, that's important here because Emsl4j will only help you acquire access tokens. You still need something to authenticate the user in the front end. Although we did change that, so now you can actually sign in users. Check that out. We actually support signing in users. And see how I said the Emsl.NET does not support signing in users? It doesn't. There you go. So here with Emsl4j, we support both signing in users and accessing the other APIs, right? Acquiring access tokens. Node.js, we have the official Emsl Node, which is very new. It has just come out, so let's jump into that. I wanted to go to the repo, so apologies for that. That should be there. So if we open this one, this is the Microsoft Authentication library for Node, Emsl Node, but it does not support all the Node scenarios. So one of the things that we do not support is building APIs. So you can build desktop apps, for example, Electron apps that call web APIs. You can build a web app that calls web APIs. My face just drops. They just added support for web API that calls web APIs. How awesome is that? I need to see that example running, by the way. Can Azure Functions do gRPC? Hey, Bruce Lane and Roscoe, Azure Functions doing gRPC? I haven't tested that scenario. That is a very good question. You can actually fire off a tweet to the team and say, hey guys, does that support? Actually, let's do that. Let's call the Azure Functions team and see if that is supported. What say you, friends? Let's do this. Pam, pam, pam. Liking my own tweet, isn't it fun? So what should we say? Hey, Azure Functions team, does the framework support gRPC with .NET, I assume? With .NET? Yeah, should we do that? CC Jeff Holland. Done and done. Send. We'll find out in a little bit. So yeah, okay, ask the question. Can we get a SAML token from the Azure AD app with Emsl? I have the resource configured, which gives me the SAML token, but I was not able to use Emsl to get it. Haven't tested that scenario. I will need to find out. Rocklane, ping me on Discord when we can follow up there. So now we support web APIs to web APIs. That is a surprise because the last time we tried to do that, it was not supporting it. So there might be some samples. And you see we have public clients. We have also confidential clients, which is pretty cool. There should be samples somewhere. Samples, there you go. And we also have Azure AD samples and B2C samples. Now the question is, on behalf of Auth to call web API. Web API validates the token and calls that. Ooh, interesting. So this is using both. Let's see if that's the right one. So you got Express, which are front end, command line, Express app using OAuth to acquire token, so the silent flow, client credentials for a daemon app. Now, why did they change? Why are they using different terms for command line and daemon? If somebody can tell me. I guess that daemon is non-interactive and this one is interactive because it's using the device code flow. Okay, so that probably explains that. But I want to see this one, the on behalf of. Web API, check this out. We now have support for Web API, I hope. Let's see, index.js. It is using Emsl Node validate JOT token or JWT. If you say JOT, you can summon JP. So we have validate JWT, the header comes in. Then we have the validate options for the audience, and there's a config, we need to go and look at that. Plus the authority, and you just call jwt.verify. Where's the JWT configured? Oh, JSON Web Token, it's a separate library. So this one verifies it. Get signing keys, JWKS client here. So that's a separate library. I just want to see where Emsl is used. Get signing key, config, confidential client here. And then on behalf of request. Oh, there you go. So we are using Emsl to acquire the token on behalf of the calling user. So the web app calls the API, and the API calls Azure AD once it validates the token to acquire a token to call another resource. So API to API calls. That is sweet. However, it's great that we can do on behalf of, but we're not using Emsl to validate the tokens, which is okay. And then we can call graph with the acquired token. But you know what? This is super exciting. I like the fact that we now have a proper sample that does API to API and API token validation. Although you do need these two things here. And I want to see what, so we have, the key and the signing, and then we have the authority and the client ID. Client secret is missing. But because it is a confidential client, it means that we can have a client secret there. It is running away from the client browser. Love it. Love it. Then we have Python. And if you are adventurous, we also have an Emsl for Go. Emsl for Go, which is, I think, in preview right now, and it's in the process of being updated. We do have updates as of 4 days ago. And it's a new edition, not yet in public preview. Did I ruin the surprise? No, it's in the public domain, so you can find it. So it's technically private preview, but not public preview, so it's not fully supported. And there's a good chance that it might get updated. But this is something that you can start playing around today. We also had a stream in the past with one of our cloud advocates that came to show us how we can build Go apps with Emsl. And that was awesome. So if you are into Go, give this a go. See? Pun intended. Totally. I segue myself into that. Okay, let's go back to the libraries. Let's see what else we have. Desktop applications. This is again a confidential client, and we support Electron via Emsl Node.js. So that means you can create cross-platform UI-based applications on Electron. If you don't know, VS Code is running on Electron. Quite a few other tools run on Electron. I think it's also Teams that runs on Electron. Java, macOS, Swift, you have UWP, and then WPF. And then we have mobile applications. We support Android, directly Android. So there's an Emsl for Android dedicated to that. There's an Android for Kotlin. So we support that via Emsl Android. Then we have, because I think the same Java library can be consumed by Kotlin apps, so you don't have to have a Kotlin specific library, if that makes sense. So for iOS, we have Emsl for iOS, and then for Xamarin, we have Emsl.net. And this is the Microsoft Identity client, not the web, it's the client. In fact, I'm doing a session later on today showing how you can build Xamarin applications with Emsl and how you can call Azure AD or B2C, depending on the needs of your application. And finally, service and daemon. We support, again, because the languages are there, we support .NET, Java, Node, Python, and Go, experimental. Which one is preview? What does it say here? Apply to libraries in public preview. Oh, supplemental terms, okay. And then we have, now obviously with Emsl and daemons, you can only acquire tokens to call downstream APIs. You cannot have an interactive session, right? I mean, you could, but it's not ideal because you don't want to have somebody interacting with your daemon app all the time. So if you're building them, then the expectation is that they will be running unattended. And for that reason, we don't expect to sign in users. We already use client credentials or a certificate with client credentials to go and access APIs and do some work for on your behalf. And there you go. I think that covers most of the major frameworks out there, or most of the major apps. If you're building something else, please do let me know, but I think that would be super exotic and not covered by this one. So shall we write some code? Shall we? Okay, let's do AD portal. There are a few ways to get started, and we'll go through the easy way and then we'll do the coding way, right? So for this one, we're going to sign in with my test tenant. If you don't have a test tenant, you can easily go and get one at the Microsoft, sorry, that's not the one I want to do. It should be +++, make it big, so everybody can see. The whole point here is that if you want to play around with Azure AD and you don't, with Azure AD and you don't have a subscription, or you don't have Office 365, so if you don't have an Azure AD Azure subscription or Office 365, which comes with free Azure AD technically, you can go and create a Microsoft 365 developer account. Microsoft 365 developer program. And I will put the link in the chat so everybody can go and start using that today. The whole point of this one is that you get 3 months of a full-blown Azure AD. I think it's an E5, so you get everything you need. You also get sample data, users, graph data, emails, calendar information, so you can play around with calling these APIs. Just be aware that it doesn't come with an Azure subscription. So if you deploy to Azure, you need to have a different subscription that you can use, but you can still use this Azure AD. However, if you already have Azure, then you already have an Azure AD. So I don't know. But sometimes, I want to use a tenant that gives me full permissions. I can act as an admin and still run on my Microsoft tenant. And that's a scenario that is probably supported, because in this Microsoft developer tenant, you will be the god of that tenant. It means that you don't have to go to anyone to provide admin consent for using any permission you want. So that's a nice scenario. And since most of the tests that we do or samples require elevated permissions, it's nice to know that you have a tenant that allows you to do that. So back to our Azure AD. We're going to create a brand new app registration. We talked about app registrations on the previous stream of Identity Crisis. So here I'm going to register an app. At some point, I think my internet is slow today. Or did I break Azure AD? As somebody said yesterday. There you go. I don't know, some weird bug. I'm running Pi-hole, by the way, so I'm dubious that things may be slowing down because of Pi-hole, protecting my network from ads. But let's see. So let's put a sample node test, and I'm not a node. Oh, sorry, what should I say? SPA test. Sample SPA test. Fine. It's not a node app. Test. And I'm not going to change anything else here. I'm just going to say register. And since I am very new to this platform, I'm just going to go with the quick starts. Quick starts are freaking awesome. If you haven't used them before, I would highly recommend them, because they will do the configuration for you. And let's go and do that example. Remember, we talked about JavaScript authentication code flow. We don't want to use the implicit flow. We should put a giant red X below that say do not use. So I'll click on JavaScript, and since I don't know what I need to change, I will let the quick start guide me. So first of all, it says this code sample is going to use a redirect URI of localhost 3000. So when we download and run this app, it will be running at port 3000. So let's go and make the changes for us. So here it's going to add the redirect URI, and it will make the update. And I will show you where it made the update, by the way. Configuring. It's not much to configure. Come on, you can do it. Is it one of these mornings? Tan, tan, tan. Oh, there you go. And just to show you what it did, it added a platform called Single Page App. If you were to do it yourself, you would come here and click on this, and then it configured the redirect URI for us, so we know where the tokens should be received. You know, so we're not using implicit flow down here, and we're only using accounts from our organization. And that's it. That's all we need to actually run this application. So let's go and download it. Although, I think I lost my download. Oh, there you go. Still there. Let's go and download this thing. This puppy. Let's download this puppy. Show in folder. So I'm gonna grab that. Nope. I'm gonna grab that and put it into my projects so I can open it in a second. So while I am copy pasting stuff like a pro, paste. Is this not how most developers do it? Copy pasting? Stack Overflow driven development. And I'll open my terminal. Woo! Look at those tokens over there. I was playing around earlier on. It's always fun. Please don't dox me. Don't copy that token line by line. Okay, so let's come out. Let's see where we are. So it's MS Identity JavaScript v2. So let's change directory into this one. And let's open in code. I want to see the code. Show me the code. Show me the code. Oh, you know what? Am I getting... Oh, I'm not getting weird light. Okay. What do we have here? What do we have here? So there's a little bit of a boilerplate node stuff to run the application. However, it is a single page app running on the browser, and the meat is in the app. Let me make this bigger. So we have one important file, which is the UI of the application. It calls into CDN to get the Emsl browser for us. And then further down, it has a couple of buttons as vanilla JavaScript. There's a sign in, sign out kind of a messaging that happens. Then there are a couple of buttons to interact with Graph. And we'll see them in action in a little bit. And that's all it is. Then we have 3 files that we're calling into. So the first one is the Uijs. This is the file responsible for changing the UI. So when we sign in, it says, hey, welcome X. And when you sign out, it says you need to sign in. And it also renders the data as they come in from Graph. There is a lot of code here just to render what comes back from the calls. And then we have the Auth Config. This is the important one. This is where we configure our Emsl. And it doesn't contain much in terms of configuration. You just need to point it to the client ID, which is the one that we just created. That client ID can be found here just to prove the point they should match. It's a 4F10. So that should be 4F10. Perfect, it matches. Then the authority is my test tenant that I'm using right now, my developer tenant. And then finally the redirect URI. Remember the HTTP localhost 3000. This is where I'm expecting my tokens, and this is what we configured in the application, or what the quick wizard configured for us. See, so this matches, match and match, match made in heaven. And then we have some settings for the cache, where we want to store the tokens to enable single sign-on, and how the tabs will be behaving when we open the same app in multiple tabs. And finally, there's some logging information here. You could, in effect, remove that and it will still work absolutely fine. Then we have 2 options for authenticating. We have a pop-up and a redirect. When you interact with the Emsl library and Azure AD, you either get a pop-up or a redirect. The recommendation is to use a pop-up, but there are some browsers that are technically limited in displaying pop-ups, like Safari on mobile. So therefore, redirect is also there to allow you to switch back and forth. So let's look at the code here. We have a login pop-up. Let's see, all the way to the top. So first is selecting an account. So once we sign in, we say get me one account. If there's no accounts, then there's an issue. If there is an account, then choose that account. Otherwise, there are multiple accounts and you need to select one. Then we have the handle response, which is what happens once we sign in. So if I sign in, we won't display the username somewhere, so show welcome message. But the meat the important bit here is the login and the sign out, or the sign in and the sign out. So Emsl, our instantiated client library for Microsoft Identity, has a login pop-up method that we pass the login request, which is defined up here. And then where the hell is the login request? We'll find in a bit. Right, so here we just say login, and then once we log in, which is a one-liner, we just handle the response, and if there's an error, we just display the error. Maybe you try to sign in to the wrong tenant, or you use the wrong account that is not available to that tenant, and this is what will happen. So this is all it takes to actually sign in with the Emsl library in JavaScript. And the logout is even simpler. It just says, just log me out for this specific account, in effect. So the logout request contains one object, which is the account that you want to sign out from. And then there's the get token pop-up, which we use to acquire a token for APIs. And this practice is standard. This pattern that you see here will be standard when you work with Emsl. So the first thing that we need to do is find the current account. And then from there, we need to use the acquire token silent method. We don't want to prompt the user for signing in or accepting stuff or interacting with the UI. Every single time we need to acquire a token. So the very first time that we present them with this acquire token silent, it will fail because there's no token in the cache, and because the user has probably not consented to what the app is going to do. They will be presented with a pop-up, which we will see in a second. But the next time, if they should just go into the acquire token silent, and if the scopes have not changed, then they will automatically get the token, right? Now, if there is an error, there is a situation where there will be an expected error. Azure AD will throw an Emsl interaction required auth error, and that changes from a platform to platform in terms of the wording. But in effect, what we're saying here is that we couldn't find the token in the cache. We couldn't find the access token in the cache. So let's go and interactively sign into Azure AD and accept the token, right? So this is what will happen here. This exception needs to be captured so we can display the message. And once that happens, then we use the acquired token pop-up to go and interactively access or grab the token. And then once it gets passed down, we log it. Please don't log your access tokens. This is just for display purposes. And then we return the login, the response to do something. In effect, we return the token back into our code so it can go and call other APIs. So that's very important. This is the format here, the way we do it. And then we have C profile and read email, which in effect will use the get token pop-up, and technically that should just do a silent acquisition of the token if it's there, and then use that token to call graph. And then there's another file here. There's a graph. There's a graph wrapper or a graph file that in effect will go and call graph for us. And you'll notice that here we're expected to pass a token, which is added to the headers as an authorization header, which has the format of bearer plus the token. So if everything works according to plan, we should get the data. Now let's run this baby and see what happens. First, we need to do npm install npm I, and then we need to do npm start. It is listening on port 3000, so let's go and see what this baby looks like. So many local hosts over here. Sign in. Let's do this. This giant sign in. So we need to use the right account. Remember, I'm using my test tenant, so we'll go with this one. And ooh, check this out. Again, I covered all these on my MS Learn module yesterday. So if you want to understand how this works and why we get this prompt, then check out the consent and permission framework module that we did yesterday. What we see here is a prompt for us to consent. Me as a user, I have to give the application permissions to go and look into my data, and the application needs to know that I am happy with that. So there's a trust framework here that I know what the app is asking for. Because if it was asking, for example, for some random data, like I want to see your OneDrive data. It's like, why? I'm just signing into an app that will show me my emails. Why do you need access to my OneDrive? That also gives you a nice pointer to what the app is going to do with your data. And we talked about best practices and what have you. But this is very similar to what your mobile apps will do. Every time you install them and run them, you'll get, hey, this application is going to access or requires access to all these things. Do you want to provide access? If not, then you know why. So right now we just say I want to sign in and I want to have offline access. So we want to have a refresh token so you can go and refresh the stuff for us. Since I'm an admin, I can also consent on behalf of the organization, which is pretty cool. I'm not going to do that for everyone. Also, if you ever come across something that looks super suspicious or an app that you were not prompted to sign in, make sure you report it down here. It's like a super tiny report. I don't know if you can see it. And then finally, I will press accept. So that will sign me in. And then I can see my profile, which is great. This is the information that I acquired as part of the ID token. We haven't done any calls to the graph yet. So let's go and see the profile. So that will be user.read. That's the scope that we need for that. Just thinking about it. Did I not press the button? Oh, sorry. I have already done that. So that was part of the profile? Yeah. So now, check this out. We're using dynamic consent. So I haven't consented to the app reading my emails yet. And the nice thing is that I don't have to pre-configure that in Azure Active Directory app registration either. I can just say, go and get me the scope. So as long as the user has permissions to access that data, which is my data now, and I have permission, I can do that. So let's say I accept. And it will come back with the data from my test tenant, which is awesome, by the way. I always have test data here in my tenant to display. And there you go. That's all it took. So let's go and do, so that was the JavaScript example. And we have all these samples on GitHub as well, so you can go and find them. You don't have to create a new app registration, although having them working end to end is super cool. So now let's go and create a .NET and ASP.NET Core app. ASP.NET Core test. Just I want to show you the comparison between the JavaScript and how much code it took there to .NET and how much code it will take. Again, accounts for my organization. I will say register, and here because I know what the authentication will look like, I want to add a platform. Yes, we're doing a web, and it will be HTTPS localhost 5001 since Kestrel is running that, and sign in OIDC. I'm not going to use implicit grant flow here for now. Configure. It's configuring. Okay. And then we just need to create a new .NET Core app. So let's stop this one. Let's come out from this directory. Let's bring it to the top. And let's say .NET new web app. So Azure pages, /auth single org. And then we'll do identity crisis. So this command will go and create a new web app for us. It will configure, well, it will download the appropriate libraries and will bootstrap the code for Azure Active Directory. And if we change into identity crisis and open any code, we can navigate through the code and see what we have there. Let's go and check our libraries first. So here you'll notice that we have, let me close this one. we have two important libraries, the Microsoft Identity Web, yes, and web.ui. So these are the brand new libraries that we talked about that allow you to easily interact with Azure Active Directory. And we wrapped the Emsl library. So they're built on top of Emsl, but they will allow you to both sign in and acquire tokens in a very few lines of code. Then with that in mind, now that we know what the libraries are and why they're important, we have the startup, which is where we actually hook up the authentication. So here we have two lines of code, services, add authentication to the default authentication scheme, and we're using Azure AD settings. The settings are here. So as you can see, it has bootstrapped the code for us, but it hasn't configured the code for us. And then what else is here? So let's go back to the startup. Then we have so this is responsible for signing in. The add authorization, we expect all the pages to use, so we have to sign in before we use any part of the app. So that's the default policy. And down here on line 42, you'll notice add Microsoft Identity UI, which is responsible for taking us the sign in page and the sign out pages and interacting with Azure AD. You don't have to write code for that because it's all done for you. And you can see where that is configured inside the cert. We have a login partial. And now we're using the new area, which is Microsoft Identity, which is part of the Microsoft Identity Web.ui. And then we have two controllers, which don't exist. We don't have any account controllers here at all, but they're part of the DLO. And then we have a sign in and a sign out. And this is responsible for displaying the appropriate message. Technically, that's all we need to run the application, apart from configuring the app. Let's talk a little bit about here, other things that we can do as well. So now this will only sign us in, but it won't allow us to acquire any tokens. So if we wanted to acquire tokens, we can do enable token acquisition for downstream API. Now here you can also pass scopes if you want to. So for the first time that you sign in, we'll also acquire an access token for your downstream API, right? And then because we are going to be using access tokens, we need to be able to cast them somewhere. And we do provide you with out-of-the-box options for caching your access tokens. So you have in-memory, you can have distributed token caches and session. Distributed takes anything, SQL, Redis, Cosmos, whatever you want. It will just make it work for you as long as you configure them. So the easiest one to start with is add in-memory, but that means that every time you restart your app, your tokens will be gone. And that's all we need here. Now, one thing that you probably noticed, I need to do that. One thing that you probably noticed there is that we can also, and I love this one, we haven't talked about this much, but no, I think I want to do that, at downstream APIs. So now if you have any helpers that call downstream APIs or wrappers, you can actually put them in here. It's like a service name. And this will do the dependency injection. And what this will do as well is will allow you to call those services without you having to go and acquire the tokens first, because they will already have the appropriate tokens passed down to them. So there will be an authorization header passed down to your solution, so to your service, which is freaking awesome. That's a great way to overcome that. But if you want to be more explicit about how these things run, there is an service acquisition. So let's go here, for example. In here, we don't have a constructor, so we can say token acquisition. Nope. And this injected class here, or interface, allows you to go and acquire tokens. So in the constructor, we do have a constructor. So I can say token acquisition token, and then here token, sorry. Saying token acquisition equals token. And check this out. Now I can come into my method and say token acquisition dot get access token for user async. Kaboom, done. Done. That's all you need. Pretty cool, right? It's awesome. I love the way that this is all done in single liners. So we abstract a lot of the complexity, but if you still want to double with JWT tokens, and if you still want to double with the token acquisition middleware, you can do that. So we're done web, and we have 8 more minutes. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a console app, right? So up until this point, we've used a public client with the JavaScript solution. We're using a confidential client, although you don't see it because it's nicely wrapped behind Microsoft Authenticated Web with ASP.NET Core. And now we're going to see a console app, a daemon app running, and what it takes to configure that. So let me close this one down. Don't save. All that code goes to waste. Let's close this one down. And then I have a CD console. And then I'm going to open this specific solution in my stuff. So this is a console app written in .NET. And again, the format should be very similar between .NET and Node or Java apps that are running as console. Let me make this big. Let me close the file here. So what we see is extremely bad practices about putting secrets and what have you in the code. So ideally you want to use a console. I don't understand what's going on, but I am enjoying your stream. We're just explaining how the Emsl library works in different types of applications. So we went about JavaScript applications and what you need to configure them. Then we went into ASP.NET Core, and I've shown you how to bootstrap your ASP.NET Core app with Microsoft Authenticated Web. And now we're looking into console applications and how you use console apps to build things. So, or authenticate and acquire tokens. So if I go back into my, code here, we have a client ID, which points to the app registration that we just configured, or we have configured in the past. The tenant ID, which points to our tenant that the application is living on. And then finally, the client secret. So in this instance, we're using client credentials. That's the flow that we're using to authenticate against Azure AD and then go and acquire a token. So this is our Emsl confidential client, the Microsoft Authentication Library confidential client. And then here we say, I want to create that client with a secret and with a tenant ID and build it. And then when we need to, we call the app or the confidential client to go and acquire a token for us. And then using a specific scope, which at this point is graph.microsoft.com.default. I talked about .default yesterday on the stream, so if you want to catch that, jump on Twitter. Jump on YouTube. God, I'm losing my words this morning. But because this is not an interactive session, we cannot consent for the scopes. The app needs to run unsupervised. We have already pre-consented to all these permissions. So all the app has to do is just say, I want all the default ones. All the ones that have consented for me, just pass them down. So here we're just saying for graph, I've consented to, I think it's mail, if I remember correctly. So we'll see in a second. And then we acquire the token for the client and we just dump out the access token. So I'm not bothering into using the token to go and call graph. We could, but for now I just want to display the token. So let's dox ourselves again by running the app and see what happens. So CLS this one, and then .NET run. Tan. Nice. So let's see what this token contains. Let's grab that and let's head out to the jwt.ms page. This is a great way to check out your tokens, although you should not be messing with access tokens, especially if they're for a third-party provider. This is mainly for educational reasons. So as you can see here, I've registered a confidential client, app registration, and then that app ID matches the app ID we had in the code. And what we say here is this is the permission I wanted to get access to, and I could use this one to go and read every single user's profile in my test tenant. That's it. So, and from a code perspective, it didn't take long, right? It has 4 lines of configuration, or 3 lines of configuration, if that's the case. 1, 2, 3, then the confidential client, which we need to instantiate. I could actually put it in 1 line and call it a one-liner. Well, let's not do that. And then finally, it's 1 line of code to go and acquire the token. So every time I need to call a downstream API, I need to call this one with the appropriate scope. And lo and behold, it just works. So there you have it, friends. That was a very quick tour of Emsl. If you do have questions about all the things I covered here, please make sure to join us on Discord, and or you can stay later on the stream and ask questions. We're always live on Tuesdays and Fridays, and I think as of this week we also have a Wednesday segment with our friends Stefan and Daniel that will be covering more IT Pro specific content. So if you want to learn about how to configure your Azure AD and what have you, then that is a perfect place to be. Wednesdays at the same time. What is the Discord link? Yes, the Discord link. Sorry, we don't have Discord on the Microsoft Developer channel, but it is at the very top of the stream, and I will put it in the chat as well. ak.ms 425 show Discord join. There you go. Make sure to join us, because this is a great place where people interact and they ask questions about identity, and we have so much fun. So thanks everyone for attending the last identity crisis. If you really enjoyed this content, if you have more ideas about what we should cover next on our stream, or if you want us to come back to do more general content type of things on MS Learn, then please do let us know. We're more than happy to support that and help you get on with your identity journeys. Stay tuned. We're going to take a very quick break, and then we'll be back in 5 minutes with Labrina and JP. Finally, JP is back for more. So we'll see you in 5 minutes on this same channel. Take care, everyone, and we'll speak soon.